Calmness is often misunderstood as the absence of emotion, but in truth it is the presence of awareness. The calm individual does not escape fear, anger, or uncertainty. He simply does not become enslaved by them. He has learned to watch his inner reactions, the way one watches clouds passing through the sky, acknowledging their form, but not mistaking them for the sky itself. This psychological distance creates freedom. Instead of immediately identifying with every impulse, he pauses, observes, and allows the feeling to reveal its message before deciding how to respond. In this space between stimulus and reaction, mastery is born. What once would have triggered panic or aggression becomes information, not command. Such a person understands that emotions are energies seeking consciousness, not forces demanding obedience. By remaining present with them, without repression and without dramatization, the inner chaos gradually organizes itself. The psyche, no longer at war with its own contents, begins to settle into order. And from this inner order arises a calm that is not fragile, not dependent on circumstances, but rooted in self-knowledge. For when you can stand in the storm of your own mind without fleeing, the outer storms lose their power over you. Behind sustained calmness lies a quiet but profound trust in life itself. Such a person has come to sense that existence is not a random sequence of accidents, but a meaningful process in which even disorder has its place. This does not mean blind optimism or passive resignation. It is a psychological attitude of cooperation with reality, rather than constant resistance to it. When uncertainty appears, they do not immediately interpret it as danger. They recognize that the mind's hunger for control is often the true source of anxiety, and that much of suffering is born from the attempt to force the future to obey our expectations. By releasing this inner grip, the nervous system relaxes and a deeper intelligence takes over. One begins to feel carried by a larger movement, as though life itself were an unfolding dialogue rather than a battlefield. This trust allows patience to replace urgency and understanding to replace fear. Events are no longer experienced as personal attacks, but as messages to be interpreted and integrated. In this way, calmness becomes an expression of alignment with the hidden order of things. When you stop fighting the current and learn to move with it, you discover that life was never your enemy, only your teacher. Another foundation of enduring calm is the presence of strong psychological boundaries. The person who remains centered in the midst of emotional storms has learned where the self ends and where the other begins. They do not unconsciously absorb the fears, anger, or expectations circulating around them, nor do they allow the opinions of the crowd to define their inner worth. This is not emotional coldness, but clarity of identity. A well-formed ego can listen without being invaded, can empathize without drowning, and can stand alone without feeling abandoned. Such a person recognizes that much inner turmoil is born from living through borrowed emotions and borrowed values. By taking responsibility for their own inner state, they free themselves from the constant need for approval or defense. They no longer react automatically to every projection cast upon them, because they know that what others see is often more about themselves than about you. In this inner sovereignty, calmness becomes natural. The psyche rests when it is no longer compelled to prove, to please, or to protect a fragile image. And when you stop living from the outside in, you begin to experience the quiet strength of living from the inside out. What we call calmness is often the result of a long inner reconciliation. The individual who appears unshaken has usually faced the parts of himself that most people spend their lives avoiding. Anger, envy, fear, and forbidden desires do not vanish simply because we deny them. They sink into the unconscious, where they continue to disturb the psyche like unresolved tensions beneath the surface. The calm person has turned toward this inner darkness rather than away from it. By acknowledging these hidden forces, by understanding their origin and their purpose, he deprives them of their destructive autonomy. They are no longer enemies acting in secret, but energies brought into the light of consciousness and given a rightful place in the personality. This process does not make one morally perfect, but psychologically whole. And wholeness has a stabilizing effect. Inner conflict diminishes when the psyche is no longer divided against itself. One no longer needs to maintain a rigid mask or suppress uncomfortable truths. From this inner honesty arises a quiet confidence, and from that confidence, peace. For the one who dares to meet his shadow discovers that what he feared most was the very source of his strength. A calm mind is rarely one that is trapped in time. Most psychological suffering arises when consciousness is pulled backward by regret or forward by fear, leaving the present moment empty and tense. The person who appears inwardly still has learned to anchor attention in what is, rather than what was or what might be. This is not forgetfulness of the past, nor indifference to the future, but a refusal to live psychologically in places where no action is possible. Memory and imagination are powerful, yet when they dominate awareness, they turn the mind into a courtroom of endless judgments or a theater of imagined catastrophes. The calm individual brings the psyche back to the only point of real influence now. In the present, one can breathe, observe, and respond with clarity. Here, the nervous system finds safety, because it is no longer assaulted by images of loss or threat that do not actually exist in the moment. Attention becomes grounded, and with it, perception sharpens. Life is no longer experienced as a chain of worries, but as a sequence of living experiences. When you return fully to the present, you discover that peace is not something to be reached, but something to be realized. At the deepest level, enduring calm arises from a sense that one's life is part of a meaningful pattern rather than a series of random blows. When experiences are interpreted only as pleasure or threat, gain or loss, the psyche remains in a constant state of defense. But when a person begins to ask not merely, "What is happening to me?" but, "What is this shaping in me?" suffering itself takes on a different quality. Pain becomes instruction, delay becomes preparation, and failure becomes a call to deeper understanding. This does not remove hardship, but it transforms its psychological impact. The soul relaxes when it perceives purpose, because it no longer feels abandoned in a chaotic universe. Even uncertainty can be borne when it is seen as a necessary stage in an inner journey toward wholeness. Such a perspective stabilizes the nervous system and strengthens the will, for one is no longer merely reacting to events, but participating in a process of growth. Calmness, then, is not passivity. It is trust in the intelligence of life and in the unfolding of one's own becoming. When you live as though your struggles are shaping you rather than breaking you, you discover that meaning is the deepest source of peace.